Hello.
Hello.
Hello, thank you very much for having us. Thank you for to the organizers of 361 Degree. And thank you for the audience for being here all day patiently and hearing all of us. We'll try to not be too long and to keep it entertaining as much as possible. In fact, we want to start with, yeah, you can start the presentation now. Yeah. We actually wanted to start this presentation with a little kind of provocation. We want to, we've been actually working together with many other people also in Mumbai and other cities for about 10 years. We started here in Mumbai. So it was a nice time for us to also reflect a bit on what we've learned from our practice in Mumbai. And when we started thinking about it, we realized that actually there are many things that we learned in Mumbai that we are now using in our projects in other cities. So we'll show you one example of this, but we'll go through projects in Mumbai and tell you a few features that we feel are inspiring and in fact could help improve the way cities in other countries are planned also.
So we do know that a lot of what we are saying seems counterintuitive, for a lot of us, because experientially, cities, particularly like Mumbai, are a challenge. Things inside that we have been able to very often, we keep chastising ourselves, and it is true, there are a lot of things which need to be worked upon. At the same time, the fact is that there is a language of urbanism which is much more complex, and a very important theme in our work is circulation, the idea of circulatory lives. We will come towards the end of the presentation, we'll talk about this theme a little more. But just for now, we wanted to point out and say that from Mumbai to São Paulo, to Bogotá, to Seoul, Geneva, Montreal, and back has been a very, very interesting journey, which has allowed us to do workshops in a small neighborhood in Geneva, where we've talked about density, and we have learned a lot of the density from our work in Dharavi in Mumbai. We have been able to go to São Paulo, and we have been able to showcase some of our work in Dharavi to people in Paraisópolis, a small neighborhood there, who have been able to instantly connect with a lot of what we have been observing. We have been able to do the same thing in other cities as well. So this is just to again point out that there is a way of looking at urbanism in India which needs a different set of structuration, a different way of thinking about urbanism, and we hope through our presentation we are able to do a bit of that.
I also want to point out at this point right now that a lot of the work we're presenting, actually all of the work we're presenting is collective work. We work in team, in fact we work as a network as well, so we have people who've stayed with us for some time in Mumbai, have moved to other cities, and then started an herbs practice in other places. And then we keep connected, we share portfolio, we share ideas, we share practice and methods. But we basically work, it's not just us, the work we're showing is very much a collective work. I'll start where our story started. And our story started in Dharavi, Kolivada. That's where we did our first project together, Rahul and me. We organized a workshop. It was a week-long workshop with the Kolis. So the original inhabitants of Kolivada, of this village, which has grown enormously, at least on the edge, and has become what is known now as Dharavi. At first, at the heart of it, there was a fisherman village that is worth visiting. And they were challenging the Dharavi redevelopment project. That was 10 years back. When we met them, we started talking about work we had done before, some projects we had done in different capacities. And they asked us if we could do something, help them plan or produce a narrative, which would be a counter-narrative to the Dharavi redevelopment project. They wanted to say that they are not a slum, they are a village, and that they have the capacity of imagining their own future. So from this, the first thing we've learned is that when it comes to participatory planning, participatory urban planning, participation is already there, it's already happening. It's not something that we as practitioners in the field have to come on invent. In fact, it's already there, and we can observe how are people participating already and build on that to create something bigger. And I think the work we'll show you in this presentation will reflect that notion very much. Then the engagement beyond space.
Yeah. See, one thing which has always shaped our practice, we've been very lucky to have very large networks of people, students, architects who have always identified with a lot of what we have been saying. But what is it that we have been saying? Maybe it's just little different from what a lot of other urban practitioners normally say, and that really comes from our own backgrounds. You know, because Mattias comes from a background of economics and urban planning, and I come from urban anthropology. But both of us felt initially that unless and until we are able to shape a language of urban practice in which we look beyond the physical space alone, we will not be able to do justice to a lot of what both architecture and urban planning and urban design can actually do. So we are ourselves not architects, but we work with architects all the time. They are the main sort of force behind our projects, and they are the ones who who sort of animate a lot of these ideas. But it is this connection we are able to have with them, which basically opens up the notion of urban space as something beyond the physical. This is something which we felt is very important. And one major way in which the idea of collective work, and this is something which is very striking, particularly for a social scientist like me, who always are trained to work alone. You know, when I first began to interact with urban planners and designers, I understood that this is really a collective effort, even as a professional practice. And that was something which also began to inspire many other aspects of collective action. So the idea that a locality is again not a physical thing, but it is collectively produced by people who live in them. One of the earliest slogans which we carried with us as URBS was the fact that we are talking about user-generated cities, in which the person who's using space is the most important person, and this is never, of course, individuated. It's a collective effort. So the idea that locality is something which is constantly being produced by people shapes the dynamism in our own practice as well.
So first concept that we want to assert as an important one, present as a very important one for practice all over the world, is this idea of the homegrown economy. It seems so obvious to people who live in Mumbai that any neighborhood will have a very lively, very vibrant local economy, local economic activities, from street vendors to small artisans to a whole range of services. But this is actually not happening as much in other parts of the world. I mean, if you've been to Europe or the US, you've seen how divided sometimes residential neighborhoods are from places where the activity takes place. This is due to the enforcement of strict zoning regulations, and it was very progressive at some point to say that we don't want polluting industries to be near residential areas. We want to separate the different type of activities. But right now what is happening is that this has gone so far that we've created generations of commuters, people who have to go from home to work every day, take either public transportation or take the car and create jams. So this, and not just that, we've created also neighborhoods which are often not very lively. They lack this street life that we appreciate when we go to visit a city or in our own neighborhoods. And so we feel that this is one thing that we should really pay attention to when we look at Indian urbanism today. It's a great quality. Maybe sometimes there's too much of it. That's a debate that we could, something that could be argued. But at the very least, there's enough of it to create a sense of neighborhoodliness and a sense of community. And the economy is also linked to the sense of identity of a neighborhood and its culture. So it's not just something which is purely it's important only for material reasons. It's something which actually creates the ethos of a neighborhood itself.
And we very strongly question this bifurcation of the formal economy and the informal economy, and we are not talking about that when we talk about the homegrown economy. We are not participating in the debate about formal and informality. In fact, the person who coined the term informal economy is actually an anthropologist in 1979, who basically was saying that I wanted to put the spotlight on the fact that this entire realm of gambling in Western Ghana, where he was studying, is essentially an economy. The emphasis is on the word economy, not on informal. But because of the way in which global political discourse was emerging, the idea of the informal economy took over, and it became some kind of a bipolar representation of of the formal economy, so on and so forth. For us, it's very important to understand that economic processes emerge from, again, human being, human activity, relationship to the environment. And if for a moment we get rid of this idea of the formal and informal, and we start looking at the economy around our own cities, particularly in cities like Mumbai, and we use a different frame of reference, we start seeing the city very differently. There is a certain structure, there is a certain process, there's a certain typology also which is part of this. So for us, a lot of what we see in neighborhoods, and settlements which are often called slums are actually a combined work-living space which gives this appearance which sort of a contemporary urban imagination cannot accept. Whereas actually the shop house, the tool house, these are typologies which emerge from the fact that there are people who use skills, resources, and they respond to the environment and produce an economy. So this is something which shapes a lot of our understanding of the neighborhoods where we work.
And this, I just mentioned this image is taken this morning from Dharavi Main Road, which is very close to our office. This structure, which is kind of very dilapidated, is also on Dharavi Main Road. It's a very old structure. We don't know, but it may be up to 100 years old. The village of Kolivada itself, this is part of Kolivada. This is Dharavi Kolivada comes to Dharavi Main Road. The village is 300 years old or 400 years old. We don't know quite how old it is, but it's definitely at least 300 years old. And so this structure was one of the old structures in the area, and it's owned by the Kolivada Jamaat. The Jamaat, so the local government. Already this is interesting for us to say that there's a lively also structure of governance which is connected to the village structure of Kolivada. And it's something that we find, of course, in rural areas throughout India. It's something that many places also around the world that are struggling with how to create local governance for neighborhoods at the very local level. And this is something which is happening quite organically, and it still exists over here.
To that. Yeah. In fact, the political governance structure is also collective. We all know that in India, prior to British colonialism, we had the Gaonkari system, which in certain places in India, like in Goa, were modernized by the Portuguese, and they were slowly sort of, they were codified further and further. But you can still see remnants of collective ownership even in Mumbai. You can see it, for example, in neighborhoods in Bandra, where housing clusters are actually owned by the Salset Society. You can see it in collectively owned housing colonies in South Bombay. The idea that land is something which is outside the space of private ownership is very endemic to Mumbai's history. And Kolivada itself, the Koli Jamaat, is essentially collectively owns a lot of the land on which the villages, the village of Kolivada exists. And within that, of course, you have layers of tenancy, subtenancy, so on and so forth.
So as I mentioned, the structure is owned by the Jamaat, and the Jamaat asked us to redesign it. So, unfortunately, we could not preserve much except from some stones. And this is what we came up with. It's a simple structure which is going to be used for 3 different types of activities, of economic activities and cultural activities also, which we feel reflect the existing modern economy of Dharavi and homegrown neighborhoods in Mumbai in general. On the ground floor is going to be small shops, just the exact same shops which are there now will be relocated on the ground floor. On the first floor is going to be a bank, so that's why we try to do this kind of like sleek bank design which connects. And then on top is a banquet hall. A banquet hall is, of course, an economic activity, and at the same time, it's a cultural activity. It's a very important function to have in any neighborhood. So, the program was totally kind of given to us by the Jamaat, and we're just doing the design. And we also tried to anticipate on what would happen with the neat little design that we did. We feel that probably in a few years' time, maybe in 2 years, what will happen is, is probably something like this, like that people who use it will appropriate it in ways that we cannot even foresee now. So this is not part of our design, it's just an anticipation of what may happen. So, billboards, extension of the shops, and, little kind of curtains. So all of those things may well happen, and it's fine like that. It's also what makes a place live. And we will see what happens with the terrace. Maybe at some point it'll become a floor. So this incrementalism and this appropriation of existing structure is something that we feel is interesting, and it's not something that we feel will violate anything. In fact, our approach to design is not that of an architect, really. I mean, Rahul mentioned he's an anthropologist. I'm an urban planner. We're interested in the neighborhood more than the individual structures. But we, of course, have architects in our team, and we find it a very interesting way of connecting with the local economy, because one of the most vibrant aspects of a lot of the economy of many neighborhoods in Mumbai, including, of course, Dharavi, is the local construction industry. I call it an industry because it is actually an industry. It's quite widespread, it's very organized, it's very structured, it's extremely efficient, believe it or not. It's probably one of the most efficient markets for producing affordable housing. Like a small house can be built for, maybe 5 lakhs, 6 lakhs. Sorry, just the construction, not the site. And in 5 weeks' time, which doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. This is the site being built now, so the construction is happening. So in a few months, you can come and visit the site. Another point that we thought was important, that a big learning from us, a big learning that we did from our work in Mumbai, is collaborative design. So in this case, we've been collaborating and working with contractors, local contractors, as well as end users a lot. In this project that I showed before, the Kolivada Jamaat decided to hire not 1 but 5 contractors in order to avoid competition between them. So they're actually collaborating between each other already. So in an environment that you would suspect would be extremely cutthroat and highly competitive, we find that collaboration is equally very true and exists, and it's a very inspiring part of how the neighborhood works. We also try to work in the same way. So the designer, the architect, here we see Jay Badgaonkar on the forefront in the image. He's part of our team. He's the main architect at URBZ, and we see him on site. So he's got an approach which is not that of imposing a design, and he's actually trying to see how it can work out on site. And we also know that as the construction happens, the design also changes. And this is something that we've learned to totally accept. We feel it's an interesting part of the process. That's something which is probably too advanced for any other country to adopt, especially in the West. But something that we feel is actually quite interesting as a way of being flexible till the end. And on the side, it's a render of a chawl that we're working on. So it's a very old structure also. We're adding 1 more floor. So this is just the design. We're just providing a design for this chawl. So again, another thing which we feel is extremely important, and that we use as an entry point everywhere we go, is that we want to understand what do people know locally, and the local knowledge is for us the most important departure point. We build on it. And we try, again, not to dismiss the capacity and the intelligence of people who live in the places where we work. So the image you see over here are 5 different designs which have been imagined by local contractors from Dharavi. So we just sat with them. They usually build and they don't necessarily design. I mean, design de facto because it becomes something, but it's not a conscious design process. It's just directly into the action, into the building. So we asked 5 of them to sit with us and imagine the best possible small house on a 10 by 15 square feet plot for Dharavi. And the only constraint in the brief was that it should accommodate some economic activity. So those are all designs that are not ours, but they are those of local contractors in Dharavi. Those are their solutions for something that could work without redeveloping the entire neighborhood. In fact, what you see there is very close to what they do usually. This is what they would like to do if they had a client who come to them and tell them, okay, you do whatever you want, and you don't have too much limitation in the amount of money you can spend. And these are tiny houses, 10 by 15 square feet. Here we see models of those designs which have been done. This is presented, so those models have been made by local artisans in Dharavi. We made a model in wood, in plastic, one in recycled plastic also, in glass, in steel, and in clay. And those photos are taken by the photographer Daineta Singh from our little gallery on T Junction that you're welcome to visit so T Junction, Dharavi. And this also, I mean, just some detail. Each time we showed a model, we also showed the producer, so the contractor who had designed it, the model maker, and details that we thought were very interesting, details that we could learn something from, that they added to their design.
Like we had mentioned earlier, that the theme of circulatory lives, of circulation, keeps coming up again and again in our work. And this is something which also began from our work in Dharavi, where the more we interacted with people, the more we realized how little we knew of their lives. And this is what we are talking about is, of course, symptomatic of many other cities as well and many other neighborhoods in Mumbai as well. But in certain places, we don't expect it. For example, third-generation residents who basically said that one of our biggest savings is for building and constructing homes back in our village. That really intrigued us, that your third generation migrated to the city, and as an urbanist, we are constantly told that the city is burgeoning and that there is a rural-urban migration in a certain way. And then we began to sort of go deeper. So this is a slight deviation, but it is also interesting because it shows us that a lot of our assumptions, even when it comes to affordable housing, what is necessary for urban infrastructure, is predicated on certain anxieties. So we went and this one big anxiety is of course rural-urban migration being a one-way channel. So we went into a detailed study which also became an exhibition which we showed at the Bhau Daji Museum last year on circulatory life. It is called Mumbai Return, in which we essentially followed a whole trail of research which has been saying that in India, most migration is cyclical, seasonal, and circulatory. Now, what does this mean to us as urbanists, as urban practitioners, as people who are talking about housing? I mean, there were many, of course, aspects of the study, but one important theme which emerged was the fact that housing is an abstracted need which often hides many more complexities. And one complexity is that of the idea of accommodation. What role does accommodation have in a city which is not necessarily about house ownership? And we suddenly found, of course, Mumbai city was full of examples, from the Goan codes to the Musafir Khanas to a whole new space of urban living, which was based on deep connections with the rural world. And just to give you a semblance of this research, we'll probably show, oh yes, yeah.
Well, just tell you quickly what you see on the image. This is one of the pieces that we had at the exhibition at the Bhau Daji Lad. It's simply we put a map of Mumbai, a map of India, and some threads, and we asked visitors to the exhibition to put a thread from their neighborhood in Mumbai to their village anywhere in India. And this is what happened after a few weeks of exhibition. So, it's just to show that it's something which is very intangible, those connections. It's very hard to capture them statistically. That first captured it. In fact, we almost see this fabric of this urban fabric of India. We say that actually those connections, this back and forth, creates a circulatory urbanism. Those villages are urbanizing very quickly, and they are actually under urban influence through the movement of people back and forth. So people bring back money, bring back ideas, and you'll see this in the little movie that we are going to show now, which is a very short movie.
Just 2 minutes.
Yeah. So I think you have to
माझे आजी आजोबा खूप वर्षापूर्वी रत्नागिरीहून मुंबईला आले. मी माझं संपूर्ण आयुष्य या शहरातच घालवलं आहे, पण मी मूळचा रत्नागिरीचा आहे. मी स्वतःला कुठला मानतो असं जर मला विचारलं, हा प्रश्न जरा अवघडच आहे. तसा मी मुंबईचाच आणि रत्नागिरीचाही तितकाच. म्हणजे मी दोन्हीकडचा समान आहे, 50-50. माझं गाव आणि शहर यामधला प्रवास आहे ना, हा मला ना खूप आवडतो. म्हणजे वर्षात एकदा तरी मी गावी जातोच माझ्या, आणि कधी जमलं तर जास्त वेळ जातो. हल्ली मी ट्रेननीच प्रवास करतो. आता गाव देखील फारसे लांब वाटत नाही. आधी पण नाही वाटायचं म्हणा. तेव्हा तर बोटीनं किंवा बसनं एक संपूर्ण दिवस लागायचा आम्हाला पोचायला, आणि आज तर ट्रेननं काय 6 ते 8 तासच लागतात. आंब्याची ती चव, तो मातीचा सुगंध, आपल्या भावंडांना भेटण्याचा आनंद. माझ्या गावच्या ना अशा अनेक आठवणी आहेत. मला खूप आवडतं तिकडे. गावी नक्कीच एक घरपण आहे. परंतु मुंबईला परत येताना देखील असाच काही घरी आल्यासारखा अनुभव असतो. गावात काही वेळ घालवला की परत कधी एकदा काम सुरू करणार ना असं वाटत असतं मला. पण जेव्हा कष्टाने काम करून काही पैसे बचत होते, तेव्हा मला सर्वात जास्त काय करावंसे वाटते, तर मला ना माझ्या गावी ना परत यावंसे वाटते. मला तिथे माझ्या स्वप्नातले घर बांधायचे. मोबाईल फोनमुळे सगळं खूप सोपं झालं आहे. दोन्ही पण ठिकाणी संपर्क करायला काहीच अडचण नाही. माझ्यासारख्यांसाठी जे दोन्ही जगांशी जोडलेले आहेत, आयुष्य खूप फारच सोपे झाले. आणि जेव्हा त्या काही गोष्टी काही इतक्या सोप्या नव्हत्या, तरी भावना काही वेगळ्या नव्हत्या ना. म्हणजे मी आणि माझं आयुष्य हे कायम विभागलेलंच होते, किंवा असंही म्हणता येईल की ते जोडलेले होते 50-50 दोन्हीकडे.
For us, of course, this is a small kind of a very simple tale about a very complex and long-winded research which we have been doing. And one of the houses which you saw in the film actually is the house over here, featured over here, which an architect friend of ours, Marius, who's part of our team, sort of paid attention to in terms of its details, and also made it evident to us that this is a chawl which has been reproduced in the village. in Ratnagiri. This particular house, the owner actually said that he found the idea of the chawl and the way in the way in which families could live, also something that he could translate into his own joint family. And of course, we found versions of the chawl in many other ways and all over Ratnagiri during our research as well. So the idea that, again, an urban form can also be reproduced over here, that urban income can go back to constructing homes in the village, the way in which urbanism actually is part of a circulatory arc. This is something which we are exploring, which is ongoing. And yeah.
So without transition, we'll just show you one example of practice in Geneva, Switzerland, where we opened an office only 2 years back, but we found that our learning from India was tremendously rich and actually valuable for the kind of practice that this city needs right now. And it may appear to be surprising to say this, but I will just explain a bit why. So URBZ Geneva has been asked to come up with a participatory urban plan for a small little patch of land which is in the outskirts of the city of Geneva, in a municipality called Versoix. It's the triangle that you see over here on the side, on the satellite photo. And this house is what is on the site now. And there's a bit, of course, it's a bit bigger. And the house we asked the municipality to let us use the house to do our entire process from the house, so work from the neighborhood. And so this, we call it the house of the process. And we make the process of planning the neighborhood. And in fact, we have to densify this neighborhood. We have to bring more buildings. We have to bring more people into this neighborhood because the city of Geneva is getting also relatively a lot of demographic pressure. There's not enough housing to accommodate the population, the growing population of Geneva. So the neighborhood has to densify. And we're doing all these plans from here, from the house. We've organized multiple workshops with residents. We've been looking at what are the local knowledge, what are the local resources that we should build our plan upon, and also what do people want. Just to give also a little bit of context to this, there was a plan for the same area 3 years back, which was rejected by the population by referendum. So people vote, they can sign a petition if up to 1,000 people vote for a referendum is voted at the level of the municipality, which is 20,000 people, and they voted against the previous project. So the municipal authorities said, okay, now we have to be careful, we have to make sure that the next project is accepted, and this is why they've called us and they've accepted to do something which is not the usual. In Geneva, it's not usual to push the participatory aspect of a project so far. Usually, it's a few roundtables and discussions and maybe a few PowerPoints, and that's it. And here we just really said, we told the inhabitants that they could of course say whatever they had to say, and not only that, if they wanted the plan that is going to come out of the process to happen, they better also push for it and be part of it, because it's not going to happen only with the developers and the architects. So this is actually, I'll just show you also a very short movie. Oops. Shows the process. one thing which is quite fun also is that because when we organize workshops, we also ask, as we mentioned before, we also are a network, so there are people a bit everywhere who come when we organize workshops. So for the first workshop we organized in this neighborhood in Geneva, we had about 10 people who came from India. So we had lots of Indian in the neighborhood, which is nice. It was fun. We always bring a lot of diversity. The same way when we organize a workshop over here in Mumbai, we also have people coming from all over the place, including from Europe. So for us, bringing this alterity, bringing this otherness, is also one of the ways in which we kind of spark creativity. These processes for us is never about creating a kind of consensus about the minimal common denominator for the project. It's always about pushing the creativity as much as possible. This is actually our last slide, but just to mention that now the process continues. We in the process of actually, putting the planning it now that we've come up through the process. We came up with a program, a pretty elaborate program, and 6 principles. You see some of them over here. Live and work is one of them. Live and work is of course something that we also think is important in the context of Mumbai, it continues, and this is we feel something that is going to continue, and we're going to do more of those projects. We would love to someday, be invited by the municipality in Mumbai to do such projects. Now we're doing participation with people directly. In fact, it's actually difficult to get the municipality to understand the value of getting people to participate in the projects. But we feel that, finally things are starting to change, and it's becoming a real new paradigm for the practice also. For us, we never saw a practice without participation. We always thought it was at the core of it. But now, finally we can actually, start planning from that paradigm.
And what we have learned specifically from the Mumbai context is that this whole idea of urban planning and participation here is intertwined very deeply with people physically. Anyway, so maybe we'll just stop here. Let's take it as a sign and have questions and answers.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.